Teal dear, let's crack on with my to-do list, shall we? Let's start by looking at an article from the New Statesman, entitled, "A Male Rape Charity Has Had Its Funding Slashed to Zero. Where Are All the Outraged Men?" Survivors UK is a UK charity with over 20 years of experience in listening and helping male survivors of rape and sexual abuse. The charity offers both individual counselling and group therapy services for victims, and they provide training to professionals and organisations working with male rape survivors. Recent government statistics estimate that 75,000 men are the victims of sexual assault or attempted assault, and 9,000 men are victims of rape or attempted rape every year. Yet, despite the figures, dangerous stereotypes still persist that men can't get raped, and we can't seem to break the taboo around the subject. Survivors UK are trying to change that. In 2014, in London, 307 men reported being raped to the Metropolitan Police, an increase of 120% from the 2012 figures. In July last year, after a review of victim services in London, it was made one of the 4 priority areas for the Mayor to remedy with the application of the £15 million funding in his control to improve services for victims. In 2015, in London, Survivor UK's funding has been slashed to nothing. I am outraged, and we all should be. Survivors UK run a vital service for men who have been affected by sexual abuse, and if it shuts, this will affect countless men in London. But perhaps what makes me angrier is that so few men and men's rights activists, more commonly known as MRAs online, have condemned this. I've always been told that feminists don't give a shit about issues like male rape or suicide. In fact, our detractors contend feminists don't give a shit about men. In case you missed the memo, feminists hate men. At least that's the impression we get from the anti-feminist men and MRAs. Most actively on the web, where they moan about men being oppressed because obviously being a man is so hard these days. Well, let me stop you right there for a moment. So you wrote this article on the 11th of June, and you claim that men's rights groups and men in general haven't been talking about this topic, despite the fact that Justice for Men and Boys, a political party of the UK, posted this on their website on the 25th of May, linking to an article that was published in the Independent newspaper also on the 25th of May, and that all of this happened about 3 weeks before your article came out. A few days after the Independent article, this was being discussed in places like the Student Room on the 27th of May, Reddit on the 27th of May, Salon.com on the 26th of May. But yeah, no one was talking about it. No men's rights groups, no men. It just wasn't being mentioned anywhere at all. This is the caliber of journalism these days, isn't it? Just make a whole bunch of assumptions. It's not like anyone's going to check them or anything. Although I would like to point out to you now that it's not the men's rights side or the anti-feminist side which is telling you that feminists don't give a shit about men, because even feminists are telling you that they don't give a shit about men. Like this girl here, who needs feminism because any time she starts a discussion about issues women face, it becomes a discussion about how these issues affect men too. Like, men are raped too. Men have body image issues too. 1 out of every 5 women is sexually assaulted, but about 1 out of every 30 men is. Over half of teenage girls use unhealthy measures to control their weight, and not even 1/3 of teenage boys will. Stop making the systemized oppression of women all about men. So here is a feminist stating that they don't want to hear about men's issues when she's trying to talk about women's issues. Because in her mind of equality, women's issues are more important than the issues of men. Even if they are the same issue. Because if the exact same issue affects both a man and a woman, it's far more important to focus on the woman than the man. Because that is equality. Something that the author of this article seems to agree with when she says that yes, there are issues that predominantly affect men like homelessness and suicide, but surely it's a no-brainer that both men and women suffer in our patriarchal society, one that prizes masculinity and expects only 3 things of women: to get married, get fucked, and have babies. I have yet to actually hear a single person ever state that that is the role of a woman in society, but hey, you keep on asserting. Why stop now? But I do love the doublethink. We live in a society where men and women both suffer, but it's a society that prizes masculinity over femininity. And there are times and issues where men suffer considerably more than women, but it's a society that prizes masculinity over femininity. You must have a very active imagination to keep that train of thought on the rails, because to everyone else it span out of control, derailed, and went over a cliff in a fireball, killing hundreds. But just for fun, and to not fall victim of that feminist who is clearly not a true Scotsman, let's look at just how much of a shit feminists gave. So first up we have Jessica Valenti, feminist author for the Pulitzer Prize-winning newspaper The Guardian, who has her own website in which she talks about feminist issues. I'm sure she raised a lot of hell about the Survivors UK charity having their funding cut to nothing, because feminists care about men, right? Oh, she didn't mention it at all. Well, never mind, because she is an author and administrator for another website, feministing.com. So I'm sure if we check over here, we will find some sort of article either written by Jessica or one of the other authors at feministing.com, because feminists address men's issues too. And if we search for Survivors UK, we find a whole host of results. All of them over a year old and nothing at all to do with the rape charity. In fact, all of the articles just talk about women's issues, and rather a lot of them about female victims of rape. No mention of male victims, though, or the charity in question. But this is no doubt just a simple oversight. I mean, we can't expect everyone to know everything that's happening all the time everywhere, right? And I know that deep down in my heart, in my soul and my penis, that feminism cares about men. So I'm sure that everydayfeminism.com will have covered the story of the Survivors UK charity having their funding slashed to nothing. Except that they didn't. In fact, the most recent point that they have spoken about anything to do with Survivors or the UK was from April. But I will not be discouraged from a little legwork. I'm sure that feminist website Jezebel.com covered this one. Always so outspoken and forthright that they are. Well, they didn't do it either. In fact, their most recent articles on that topic come from over 2 years ago. But no matter, for the fword.org.uk, contemporary feminism from the United Kingdom shall surely rise to the occasion and demonstrate to us that feminism cares about men's issues too. Oh, they didn't cover it either. Moving on. However, Paul Elam, the founder of A Voice for Men, disagrees and told the Huffington Post that the problem we see is a culture that puts women first in so many ways and men last. Men's Rights Canada launched their controversial Don't Be That Girl campaign, which said that women often make false rape accusations because they feel guilty for having one-night stands, and on Return of Kings, which I would like to point out to everyone is not a men's rights website in any capacity, something which its founder Roosh V has pointed out numerous times. When commenting on the statistic that 90% of women know their perpetrators in rape cases, a contributor wrote that a man looking to rape someone would not pick a target who could identify him to the police. The focus from men's rights activists seems to be on false rape accusations by women, which are far and few, rather than helping male victims of sexual violence. Now, I'm going to laugh at the false dichotomy that this author is proposing. You don't have to exclusively focus on helping male victims of sexual violence or dealing with false rape accusations. You can actually do both simultaneously. But I would like to take a brief moment to look at this false rape accusation, specifically the few and far between claim. Now, while this author didn't expressly state it, a common figure that you will hear a lot of feminists talk about is the 2% rate. That is the assertion that only 2% of all rapes that are reported are actually false. I'm sure we're all familiar with images such as this from the Enliven project. And this 2% figure is something which has been quite extensively studied, and its origins have been traced back to Susan Brown Miller's paper, Against Our Will. Her citation for this figure is a single speech made by one judge before a small group of lawyers, and the source was a statistic for a single area of New York. But if you actually check her writing, you will find something rather interesting. First of all, the information is nigh 3 decades, by now over 4 decades, out of date. It initially found that 20% of all rapes reported to the police were determined by investigation to be unfounded. By 1973, that figure had dropped to 15%. So the rate of false accusation would actually seem to be 15%, but let's see where they get the 2% from. When New York City instituted a special sex crimes analysis squad and put police women instead of men in charge of interviewing complainants, the number of false charges in New York dropped dramatically to 2%. So instantly, this is a bit of an anomalous result. But what it would seem to indicate is that if you have a police woman interviewing a woman who claims to be raped, that there is a possibility that a woman would be less likely to lie to another woman, or more likely to lie to a man who is interviewing her. Or it's possible that because this study was conducted over a very limited time period, that this may simply be a total anomaly in which a smaller number of false accusations were made. Which is why this particular book has to conclude that ultimately we are left to conclude that there is no published study or data to support any claim that the false rape allegation is, or was, ever down around 2%. Not anywhere, even according to those who originally cited that number. Rather, the number comes from a judge giving a speech to some attorneys 30 years ago whose source has, to date, not been validated. And this viewpoint would seem to be reinforced by a paper published in 2000 entitled The Truth Behind Legal Dominance Feminism's 2% False Rape Claim Figure by Edward Greer. Now, it's a reasonably short paper which I do encourage you all to go and read in your own time, but I'm going to have to give you the teal deer version of it. The author looked at 3 papers where this 2% figure had been quoted and basically went through the citations to try and find the origin of it. And he found that all 3 of Professor Torrey's sources turn out to be derived from the same single source. Moreover, as best as this author could ascertain, without exception, every scholarly or semi-scholarly source that utilizes the 2% false claim proposition can ultimately be traced back to against our will. Despite the plethora of pyramid citations, it turns out that there is one, and only one, underlying source: feminist publicist Susan Brown Miller's interpretation of some data, now a quarter of a century old, of unknown provenance from a single police department unit. There are no other published studies that this author could find. All of the sources cited at the outset of this article trace back to Miss Brown Miller. The author actually requested a copy of the original speech cited from Miss Brown Miller, and then goes on to state that Miss Brown Miller, who is a very meticulous and organized writer, very kindly, on my request, located and sent me a copy of this Xeroxed speech. In relevant part, the judge's speech reads, "In fact, according to the commander of New York City's Rape Analysis Squad, only about 2% of all rape and related sex charges are determined to be false, and this is about the same as the rate of false charges of other felonies. These judicial remarks do not suffice to determine whether or not there was an underlying written report, although the locution used is suggestive of being based on a quotation from a newspaper article rather than a formally written text. When I contacted the then judge's law clerk, and he made inquiry of all those directly involved in the preparation of the Judge Cook's speech, their best recollections are that they did not rely upon any report, but cannot remember precisely how they did obtain the 2% figure. Of course, it remains possible that some such report was generated, but as of this date, no one is able to adduce it. Without the document, one cannot analyze the underlying data, the protocol used in evaluating it, or even whether it met minimum criteria of accuracy." All of which led to the author's inevitable conclusion that it seems clear that the 2% false claim figure, which has pervaded LDF discourse, has no basis in fact. Since this figure is clearly unsupported, there is no justification for shifting the burden of proof or redefining consent in rape crimes in accordance with this figure. The shifting the burden of proof there is a reference to feminists' constant demand that basically men have to prove their innocence when accused. But back on track to what this article was getting at the end there, stating that men's rights activists are too concerned with trying to tear down and attack feminists rather than helping men. Well, when feminist authors have published bogus papers and bogus research that produce very questionable results, such as that 2% figure, which are then used to enact legal change, is it any wonder that people have to attack that research? They have to look at it and they have to say, this is wrong and here is why. It has nothing to do with necessarily attacking feminism, and certainly nothing to do with attacking women. It is a constant battle against deliberate, manipulative misinformation. It's just rather coincidental that it is a lot of feminists and feminist women who are publishing that misinformation. Your gender and your ideology are not and should not be a shield from criticism. But our young author isn't going to let a little bit of facts or reality get in her way, as she states that the reality is the MRAs are a group of misogynists who spend their time on the internet saying things that simply aren't true or attacking women. Projection much? The Southern Poverty Law Center describes their activism as dedicated to savaging feminists and, in particular, women. No, it doesn't. It actually says that the manosphere is dedicated to savaging feminists in particular and women. A statement which is still massively inaccurate. But hey, when you're a website which cites manboobs.com, better known as We Hunted the Mammoth, a pro-feminist website as if it's some sort of source of authority, I think we can quite safely say that your opinion is null. And now a quick point to our young author here, who doesn't seem to be able to do any research nor critically think about anything. Manosphere is not a synonym for men's rights movement. There certainly are people within the manosphere who hold misogynistic views. In fact, I myself have pointed a few of them out, and laughed at their stupidity. Just because one person within the manosphere holds a misogynistic viewpoint, that does not mean that everyone within the manosphere holds a misogynistic viewpoint. And you will find that the different camps within the manosphere, while there is a fair amount of crossover between many of them, some of them are also very different from others. For example, there are certain MGTOW out there who do hold very misogynistic views, but overwhelmingly the majority of them do not hold misogynistic views and in fact quite heavily chastise those who do for besmirching the philosophy. There are some MGTOW who are men's rights activists, but not all men's rights activists are MGTOW. There are some people within the manosphere known as pickup artists who work quite specifically towards attempting to have sex with women. Some pickup artists are men's rights activists. Some are not. Some pickup artists are also MGTOW. Some are not. Are you getting the idea yet that this is quite a large and diverse group of people that you are very sweepingly generalizing about? But anyway, enough about that. Let's get back to the article. MRAs do not really care about men. They resent feminists not only because their campaign to get rid of page 3 denied them their daily wank at the breakfast table, but also because every step forward in achieving gender equality where women are not a subclass of fuckable objects is a disadvantage in their eyes. Citation needed. Find me a few examples of men's rights activists who demand that women be turned into a subclass of fuckable objects. Also, the removal of page 3 denying people their pre-breakfast wank. Seriously, have you never heard of internet pornography? It's a lot better. You can find anything. Straight porn, gay porn, group sex, old and young, pregnant fetishes, even interracial. There's something for everyone on the internet. And sadly, their resentment towards the fight for the liberation for women does not actually make any difference to the men they are trying to help. I'm sure that men who genuinely believe in gender equality must be fed up with their rhetoric that the reason why men are suffering is because of women. This kind of proves to me that you did no research into the men's rights movement at all. A lot of the men's rights movement doesn't think that men have problems in society because of women. There's a few who do, and there are a few social issues that seem to be caused more by women than by men. But generally, the fight is against something called gynocentrism, the belief that humans as a species have built a society around the idea of protecting women, and that men should go out of their way to serve women whenever possible, which is why we have notions such as chivalry, don't hit a girl, open doors for women, and so on and so forth. And that a lot of these chivalrous acts and thoughts have made it into legislation and the court system, which is why studies will consistently find that women will be given lighter sentences than men when they perpetrate an identical crime. And that assumes that they even go to trial in the first place, because it is, again, consistently found that women are less likely to ever even be taken to trial. It is not the belief that men suffer because of women, it is the belief that men are generally made to suffer because of society, a society in which they are generally seen as disposable utilities, which is why when men make up the majority of workplace deaths, people tend to get frustrated by the fact that feminists never seem to address this. But anyway, back to the article. It seems that if men and MRAs aren't writing, and let's be honest, complete bullshit, holy fuck the projection, they are attacking women. Citation needed. Men's rights activist and founder of Justice for Men and Boys, Mike Buchanan, has accused the founder of the Everyday Sexism Project, Laura Bates, of lying because she talks about sexism and the disproportionate effects it has on women compared to men. He also gives out awards to feminists for lying. Okay, but what's the problem here? Because you seem to be insinuating that when a man calls a woman wrong, that is somehow a problem and shouldn't be happening. I mean, as we've shown in this video, and as I have documented in the past, feminists can and will intentionally lie or manipulate data in order to push a narrative, and you seem to be implying that pointing this out is somehow wrong. It's almost like you believe that women should be above criticism or critique even when they are spouting complete bullshit. As I have said before, your gender is not and should not be a shield from criticism. Men on the internet can send the feminist campaigner Caroline Criado Perez online abuse detailing how they want to kill, mutilate, and rape her, interspersed with comments about the inequalities that men face and how men are neglected. You are aware that anyone can do that, right? It's not only men who can use emails and the Twitter. Women can do that as well. And just because they can do that, does that mean that that's what they are actually doing? Also, is it really a gendered issue? Because there seems to be quite a large amount of evidence that points to the fact that men are harassed as much, if not more, than women online. It's just that women are more likely to claim that they are receiving it because they are women. So it seems that women on the internet seem to jump to the "rah, it's misogyny" answer, rather than just accepting it's because they're being an idiot. And then our brave young author questions, but do we see them taking any action? Well, they try to, when they're not being shut down by feminist protests.
We're not super interested in talking to you, first of all, but basically we're here to shut down an event that is promoting the patriarchy.
Very frustrated. I was studying all today, and I took time out of my studies to come here.
Would you like to ask him why he's here?
I'm not sufficiently convinced that I'll receive an answer that isn't what I've presented.
2 of my friends committed suicide, and I want the peace of understanding why that happened.
Wow. When did this happen?
It happened about 2 years ago. It was one after the other like that.
Did you expect to get some addressing of suicide issue at the talk here?
Yes, I did. I think everybody's voice should be heard. I wondered why the security was trying to keep me back, and I think it's for my own safety.
This is what men's rights look like! 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 You have a murder, bastard! Yeah, you're fucking stoned! Fuck you! They're fucking pigs!
So you believe it's hate speech, right?
It is hate speech.
I've never heard him before. I don't even know what he's talking. I've never heard of him before.
We invite you to educate
I just
yourself.
so I just wanted to listen to him.
Go on Google.
I just wanted to see who this guy is and what he's talking about. But now I can't get him.
You should be fucking ashamed of yourself. You're fucking scum. You are fucking scum. Fucking rape apologist, incest supporting, woman hating, fucking scum.
Is there someone else I can wait to see more following?
Fucking scum. Yeah, just another.
I just want to listen to someone else's opinion. I'm not even on a side here. I just listen to as many people as I can.
You know what though? Why would you pay money to fucking support a fucking rape apologist if you weren't fucking one?
I've never heard him say anything that was.
Well, it's fucking scum.
The idea that the world doesn't revolve around men's needs is inconceivable for MRAs, and that is why they try and get women to shut up, painting misogyny as the righteous option in the process. Men's rights activists forget that the feminist fight for equality will benefit us all. As Laura Bates, the founder of the Everyday Sexism Project, has said, it's not about men against women, but people against prejudice. Yes, it's men trying to get women to shut up, isn't it? I'll try and remember that the next time I sit and watch a video of a bunch of feminists pulling a fire alarm at a men's rights meetup in order to totally not silence them. Frankly, this entire article stinks a little bit of Sargon's law and hypocrisy. Rather than raising awareness of this charity's lack of funding and attempting to get feminists engaged in an actual men's issue, they instead choose to use the whole event as a means of attacking the men's rights movement. Quite hilarious for someone who has been shortlisted for Red's Smart Woman of the Year award, which sets a depressingly low benchmark for what we now consider to be smart. But amidst all of this, we cannot forget that the real people who are going to be suffering from this are the men and boys who are now not going to be getting the support that they need. Because by removing funding from this charity, the British government is sending a very strong message that they do not consider men's mental health to be worth investing any money in whatsoever. And then they wonder why the leading cause of death for men in the UK under the age of 35 is suicide. I'm going to leave you now with a short video from Survivors UK, and I encourage you at the end of this video to use the links in the description to visit their website or their YouTube page and show them your support, because right now they need it.
My mates were dead jealous of all the new stuff I got. They all thought it was cool. New toys, gadgets, kites, radio-controlled car. I was popular. And then it stopped. I don't know why it stopped. I didn't want the touching to carry on, but I don't know why it stopped. And that bothers me. I suppose he stopped liking me. Sorry to go on. Other people must have had it much worse. I only had to toss him off occasionally and let him do the same to me. He said my mum wouldn't believe me, that it was my fault. I must have brought it on somehow. Sometimes I feel people can see it written on my forehead, like I'm a marked man. They can tell what happened, like somehow it must show. People judge, don't they? I read in the papers that if you're abused, then you're more likely to become an abuser yourself. I've got kids now. I pretend I've got a bad back, so I make sure not to pick them up and cuddle them too often. I make excuses not to bath them. I don't mind really, but I do worry, if I'm honest, that when I wash them down there, it will trigger something in me. Even worse if it stimulated something in them. The last thing I want to do is to hurt them. I can read them stories though, and that's alright because I can do that from a distance. I must have asked for it somehow. Like I said, I'd never hurt my kids. So I keep a distance. It's just easier.